The opinions and statements made by the guests of the Success in Practice podcast are their own, and I do not endorse or accept responsibility for their positions. Any information given by myself or the guests is educational in intention and not to be taken as medical advice. If you choose to act on the content involved in the podcast, you do so at your own risk. Okay, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Success in Practice podcast. Today, I'm joined by Hedley Chin. Hedley has 25 years of experience as an osteopath, probably a little bit more, I think, Hedley. A British School of Osteopathy graduate. He has been practicing and or teaching in Sydney since 1998. For Hedley, science and art are at the heart of a modern osteopathic clinic. He believes that modern research has affirmed a lot of what osteopathy has traditionally taught. And where there are still gaps in our medical knowledge, osteopathy has rational explanations that can provide clinicians with direction and useful tools to help their patients. He spends about 2/3 of his time as an osteopath working structurally using traditional osteopathic techniques. The other 1/3, he gives himself more time to look after more complicated and more subtle presentations. Hedley also has a keen interest in helping and treating infants and babies. My first encounter with Hedley was when he was teaching HVLA at University of Western Sydney. I think he taught that as we were exiting that course in our final year, and really utilizing short lever or minimal lever approaches. And so I want to thank Hedley for being here. Hedley, thank you and welcome to the podcast finally.
Thanks, Sammy. That's great. I don't think we've seen much of each other in the last 25 years.
No, not much.
Have we avoided each other?
Well, no, mate, I wouldn't avoid you, Hedley, but I think, well, there's probably been a couple of social little drink ups, but many years ago, we don't do that stuff anymore. And I am actually, I'm planning something, I think, soon for our little Sydney compatriots, I think, to get together and have a drink and catch up. We're overdue.
Yeah, I feel we've missed out somehow. There's been less social.
Yeah.
Since COVID,
yes.
I think maybe.
Yes.
People haven't bothered getting together in quite the same way.
I think we need to bring that back. So that'll happen.
Let's do that.
Hopefully just after Easter, we'll get together and have a couple of drinks. But first, Hedley, people are interested, as always, to know more about you. So give me a bit about you, Hedley, growing up. Tell us where you grew up as a young kid. Tell us where you went to school and what finally got you towards osteopathy.
Thanks, Sammy. Yeah, so I'm from the southwest of England, Bristol, where I grew up. That's a nice place to grow up. It's a pleasant place. It's sort of, country, largely.
Poor old Bristol City?
Yeah, poor old Bristol City. They, I enjoyed it. It's a nice place to come from. I ended up going to school away from home. And I don't actually always tell people where I was educated. I had the sort of education that when people find out, they form an opinion of you. So I'm actually an old Etonian. I studied at Eton College, which is an unusual way to get educated. Like that's for a Bristol boy going off to Windsor and you're going back to like the 17th century or something when you have an education like that.
Eton College, isn't that Prince Charles or Prince Harry? Or
something? One of those.
One of those.
Yeah. So both. Yeah. So it's an unusual place to find yourself. I was in school with folk that sort of were more familiar with that environment than I was. I felt like I was a fish out of water, just a local Bristol boy that all of a sudden is, walking in those hallowed halls where a lot of distinguished people have had their education. So,
did your parents decide to send you there, Hedley?
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. Why do you think?
Yeah, I still don't know exactly. I think it was just my father had heard that this was the best of the best type idea.
It wouldn't have been cheap.
No, not cheap.
Not cheap at all, right?
Not cheap at all. My father had his own business and he just was on a mission. I think my father didn't enjoy his childhood. And so he was pretty keen to try and make sure that, at the time there was us three boys, and he was pretty keen to make sure his boys had a better start than he
All
did.
three
I
of you
think
went
it
there?
was no, not in the end, but we all had good educations. I mean, he was keen to make sure we were all educated well.
That's very good.
And, yeah, it's interesting though. You're in that environment. It's very different. You're away from home. You've got your own room. You're in a boarding school. They're teaching you stuff that was just 400 years old, and they're telling you it's important, and they're telling you that this is what society is made of. This is what culture is made of. Pay attention. It was a very different experience.
Is it important now that you look back?
I think, it was a time, being a boy, being a man was different. It was 1983. Like we were raising men, to be industry leaders and to take on the world and to solve the world's problems. And I mean, I can see where it came from. I mean, it's got its heritage. There's lots of philosophy and ancient history and ancient ways of. There's certain truths that have stood the test of time in male arenas.
So they were raising men. What happened to Charles?
Yeah, well, actually, Charlie didn't go there, but his sons did.
Right.
And, I think, yeah. Let's.
Yeah. See, one went one way, the other went the other. Right.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's part of the story for Eton is that it raises it because it teaches a type of individualism.
Right.
You get some some people who choose to play by the rules and enter, industries, and then it also makes some very, very naughty boys as well.
Right.
Very successful naughty boys.
Do you think that it's as much about the networking as it is about the actual education? Like,
Yeah.
Does that have a lot to do with it?
I think, look, a lot of the boys there are there because their father went there and their grandfather went there. I mean, I met kids whose families, they knew their family over the last 200 years. They could name all the famous politicians that had come from their family. I think, like, at the different youngsters that were there when I was there, I think that I now know 3 prime ministers, I think, that were there when I was there. So it's definitely that it was in that environment for encouraging those types of boys to do well. But you're right. I mean, they already had a network. These were already families that knew one another and supported one another. It had that. And even though I was, attending school and I was an Etonian, there were many levels of access. You weren't necessarily going to hobnob with. There was quite a few special people there.
Right. Do you think that's what they call? That's what they refer to patriarchy now when they refer to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think. Look, there was the idea of being a royal subject and the idea of being in service to the crown or service to your country. There was plenty of that. Although, interestingly, they did also have an anarchists club. There were people at Eton who actually felt that they identified as being anarchists.
Right, right. Well, it's not all bad. I mean, like, I'm sure as much as that kind of environment would be, I guess, it would lend itself to being very club-like, very kind of, cliquey. At the end of the day, though, that's how things happen. Networks form and people get to know each other and trust builds and people can get things done.
I think it was also about, look, you'd be teaching. So some of the stuff that we were being taught then, you'd find a lot of that stuff being taught in most schools now, right? The importance of the importance of an education, the importance of becoming skilled, the importance of being able to have a conversation, the importance of being able to carry yourself in different company and having confidence. You were put in quite a few bizarre scenarios so that you could feel tested and so you could experience yourself overwhelmed and feel yourself adapting and thinking on the spot. And so then when, regular life was just so much easier to deal with than school life. You've already It's like, you've seen yourself through a trial.
Yeah, understandable.
So, once I was, 18 years old and left school, everybody had clearly picked up some kind of confidence trick. You just become a confident young man.
Right. Well, that's
So,
important.
that's helpful, right?
That's very helpful, right? That's a lot of
Yeah,
what I guess gets us our buy-in
yeah,
from patients that we'll probably
yeah,
talk about later.
yeah,
What I did want to ask you, this was a boarding school. Eton's a boarding school, right?
yeah,
You go and you
yeah,
board
yeah,
there.
for sure.
Do you
Yeah,
think that obviously, given the opportunity of being there and learning in that environment,
yeah,
and that was probably one of your dad's wishes, that you guys have a great education and go through
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Was there things you missed out on of not actually having that contact with your family?
It's like a lot of things.
Or is it like you don't know what you
You
don't
don't
know?
know what you don't know. Yeah, like it was great fun being one of the boys, right? The boys stick together. The boys look after each other. The boys are very close. You have really good friendships, and they stay with you for life, right? Um, no, yeah. For me, it was generally, I kind of liked it. It felt privileged. It felt special. It felt like someone was trying to turn you into something meaningful.
Mm,
It's like having purpose and
mm,
meaning right from the word go. I mean, there's a lot of people who are, having no experience like that. Like there's
yeah.
all those people who's neglected as a
Mm,
child, and I think, geez, I knew that my parents were. Going out of their way to pay for the education. And so you were important, you were told you were important. And it's good to have that sense of responsibility. If you're important and your life is important, and so make sure you do. You got a real sense that life was a skills based idea, meritocracy. Learn, learn the skills, get better,
mm.
produce the skills. Your efforts were important.
Well,
Yeah,
this is important in the context of osteopathy as well. As
yeah,
I think once you appreciate the history and what's happened before you, you
yeah,
feel important because
yeah,
there's been a lot that's come before you, and
yeah,
if you don't understand that, don't know it, and don't appreciate it,
yeah.
you don't have as much drive to take whatever you've been given and then push it
Yeah.
forward as well. I think,
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that's one
yeah,
of the things that you don't realize when you're a young person. Your being is actually nested inside of a sort of you're in an arena already. The arena has already been established for you,
mm,
but it's invisible to you. I mean, it's like well, sometimes like whether or not you understand that you're growing up in a Christian country or
mm.
something. Like it might not be obvious to you that you're in a Christian country, but that's because you're dipped in that ink and it's invisible to you.
Yeah, but
I think,
somebody along the line fought in a crusade. Yeah,
someone put their life on the
yeah,
line so that you can have your liberties and your freedoms.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it holds true with osteopathy. I think someone along the way fought really hard
yeah,
to get you that title, that
yeah,
registration piece of paper that you got hanging on the
yeah,
wall.
yeah.
And I guess we shouldn't take that for granted, should we? Like that's not.
No, I mean, that was the thing that you then get so I was at the BSO.
Mm,
One of the things you get from the BSO is that this course, or a course like it, has been running for 90 years by the time I attended the course, right?
mm,
It's 90 years in gestation. And then, lucky you that you've come along at a point where so much of our understanding has been formed and thought about, and so then the education has been tried and tested, and so by the time I'm attending the British School of Osteopathy in what's that, about 1990, something like that, it was a very well established way of trying to teach the
mm,
principles of osteopathy and trying to get you to actually equipped
mm,
as quickly as possible. Yeah, you definitely got a sense that lots and lots of people had come before you and
mm,
had really worked hard to try and create a course that was meaningful
mm.
and immediately approachable.
Yeah, right.
Uh, well, because it's there are still so many different ways in which you might understand osteopathy.
Yeah. I,
even in your earliest education.
I don't like to kind of segue too quickly out of this particular topic, but I will just to because I've got something on my mind at the moment. We saw a paper a little while ago from a couple of British fellows who really tore apart the philosophy of osteopathy. I'm trying to remember their name. They
Right.
talked about how the anatomical physiological basis of osteopathy wasn't founded on anything concrete, and the whole thing had to be. Did you see that at all, Headley? They were
No, not that
right.
particular paper. Nothing.
Anyway, I'm
Nothing
trying to remember the
recent.
name of the authors, but
Yeah.
the question I have is that, although the comment on and the topic I guess I want to discuss with you is that given that 90-year history, because these are
Yeah.
British guys, given that 90-year history that you talk about, I
Yeah.
mean, are we fools to think that the 90 years of people coming along before us were like just idiots that didn't think scientifically?
I mean, we have to be careful
You know,
to make sure we're not idiots.
no,
I
no,
mean,
are we fools to think that they were idiots?
I think we have to be careful just because, I mean, it could be that they were all delusional,
Right.
suffering a huge circle jerk, and they just really enjoyed
Okay.
touching each other. I mean, it's possible.
It's possible, definitely possible.
But I mean,
Probable, probably not probable.
look, I mean, so you're talking about whether we should, what sort of evidence do we have, and what's osteopathy built on, and what can we say to justify some of the beliefs that we have in osteopathy? Because it's true, right? A lot of practitioners, once they've established their way of being, you do end up having to join dots in osteopathy because there isn't the evidence available, and you do need to feel justified in the approach that you take, and you need to feel as if you've done some critical thinking and you have a rationale, and yeah. But we've been through an interesting time with evidence. Though. Evidence is very interesting stuff.
It is. Do you think though that we've got a good track history of critical thinking and applying the scientific method to what we do and how we perceive, I guess, the human body? Have we?
So yeah,
reading, I guess, historical texts and those before us. Do they seem like they are rational people who are looking at the body in a certain way, or do you not agree
No,
with that?
I think we have to be really careful because sometimes we can't. What's normal for us is simply what's around us and stuff that we've gotten used to. Like, we don't know our own biases. So I think we have to be really careful. I think there's a reason to continue searching for evidence. I just think we have to take a lot of care when we have an idea and we put it into practice, and then we try to use a reductionist approach to verify that idea. And then we can't actually establish that idea with evidence. But at the moment, what seems to happen with evidence is if we don't establish the evidence, then this thing doesn't exist in reality. We're doing something false. And I don't think we have the evidence for that either. I mean, we struggle. Our whole model is difficult because we are taking individual moments with individual patients to make an assessment of their neuroendocrine muscular biosocial state right now, and deciding what to do that would be helpful to take them from their current state to a less painful state, a less alarmed state, a less anxious state. And this sort of thing just hasn't been established.
And then trying to apply that to an entire population.
Right. And then trying to make it so real that this is the only thing we'll teach to undergraduates, and this is the real osteopathy, and this is defendable, and this is the problem. Okay, so one of the things that I see is that the world is doing paradoxically, the world is doing two things at one time, in terms of truth, in terms of what's real. I mean, I think one of the reasons I enjoyed science right from the word go is because there's some part of me needed to be tethered in reality. Like I found growing up was pretty noisy, and there's lots of influences, and it's hard to know what's real and what's true. And so science says, well, I'll tell you the story of what's real. I'll test the world for you, and I'll test what's real and what's not real. And I find that very appealing. I think I was mechanistic as a young boy. I played sport, played chess. The world seemed to be physical, and so things really ought to be physical and ought to have a physical description. So it seems. But we're actually, so on the one hand, yes, physical evidence, sure. But in actual fact, people today are searching for a type of internal evidence, my truth. Like for human beings, my truth has become much more important than the truth. I think it's one of the things that we miss in osteopathy is that there's a fantastic book. There's this fellow Ken Wilber. Ken Wilber was writing in like 1990. He developed an approach called all quadrants, all levels, and it's an attempt to look at why we have contradictory understandings of the world. Like why can't we have agreed realities? Like why do I, like I'm having one experience here in this podcast and you're having something similar but fundamentally different. In this moment we might be able to agree certain parameters that are the same for us, but I'll go away and remember this experience one way and you'll remember it another way, or just brush me aside cheaply and move on to your next guest. But so we're really not in the same reality, and we can't be in the same reality. It's the way in which our minds work is to present us with a reality that we find palatable. But each of us is having a false reality, an attempt to tether ourselves in meaning and purpose. And so I think that's one of the difficult things about when you're asking about evidence and truth. One of the things that people are saying is that deep inside of themselves, they have a knowledge and an awareness and an experience that it can be completely counter to the available evidence. But that doesn't matter because that's my truth, and that's important to me. Like it's it's more important than any verifiable reductionist evidence-based truth. And I think this is one of the things that's happening in the treatment room.
Yeah. From what you're saying is, there's objective truth, and then there's truth as you observe it through your senses.
I don't
and
think
each person. And then there's each person has their own senses, and they observe that truth through their own filter.
Yeah.
And then that is what is meaningful to them.
Yeah.
And you're saying that when weighted against each other, at the moment, the truth that is filtered through your own senses has become more meaningful than the actual objective truth.
I think so. And I think you can have a whole conversation on the availability of objective truth.
Do you think that's healthy?
What?
Do you think it's healthy for people to kind of maybe forego objective truth for their own filtered truth? Like, like when you start extrapolating that to, for example, men competing in women's sports, when you take a controversial topic like that. Right? And somebody, sorry, but let me just make the point. But then somebody's saying, well, that's that man's that's that man's truth, that he sees himself as a woman, and then me and you are watching the game, and this guy's beating the crap out of the girls.
Yeah.
And we look at each other and go, well, that's not truth at all, and everyone can see what's happening here, right? And so is that, though, when you take somebody's filter of their truth and then you put that above the actual truth that's out there, do you think that's a healthy paradigm?
No, I don't. I don't. Well, I'm not sure. The word healthy is, I'm uncomfortable with healthy because I don't think we can avoid. I think this is a feature of how our brains work. And so I think we're trapped inside of our brains giving us a world that makes sense. And I think for different people, choosing a world that makes sense is a very different thing for different people. Like I said, for whatever reason, my internal nature, growing up I was about 10 years, 11 years old before I realized I like science. I like things to be dependable. I like a fact to be the same fact, whether you change house or change schools. I like knowledge to be a thing that you can obtain. But then you have to question, well, the person that went out to seek this knowledge was a particular type of person seeking a particular type of knowledge. Reality, particle physics, quantum physics is showing us that reality is actually a very strange thing, and it's not as dependable as our sort of a cause and effect type of physical world. So I think we have to allow for the fact that for a person to be well on all quadrants and all levels, they may have a story that's particular to them that is keeping them well, healthy. I mean, I think, but can we have, I think, but can we all, one of the problems for us, of course, is we're all trying to mix in society for the first time ever. For the first time in history, we have all of these peoples and all of these cultures and all of these ways of being, crowded next to one another on the tube. Like we're all sharing this space. And so is it healthy? No, I don't think we've gotten to a point of being healthy, right? I think we're too new at this. This is the modern age. We've never had to get on with each other in quite the same way. I mean, I come from a country where people have different accents still because for 500-600 years no one went over the mountain and met the people on the other side, and so people separated by a hill would have a different dialect. And then suddenly now we all receive the same information, the same news, the same channels, the same propaganda, the same cajoling, the same influencing. Why do we all want an iPhone? Like that was very clever. Like that was just so clever that you create a device that everybody wants. And then, we're living in a society where even if you're a beggar or a pauper, you still have an iPhone. I mean, that's like a minimal level of gameplay now. I mean, that was incredibly clever to teach us that we had that need that we didn't even know we needed. I mean, yeah, so never before have we taken all of these countries and all of these people and all of these different types of being and homogenized them into the modern person who's supposed to get on with all other modern people. I mean, there's so many people whose early life doesn't allow them that degree of flexibility in their truth, right? Some people are locked into a truth that doesn't bend very well.
Yeah, I guess you could have your perception of how you interact with the world, and then you could live that perception out. But I think the buck has to stop where your own perception might harm other people.
I agree. Yeah, no, I think that, and society has that as a measure, right? Yes. Do no harm to personal property.
Yes, we have put that aside though in certain instances, right? We're doing more of that these days.
Today's society seems that you don't have to be right or wrong; you just have to have the numbers.
Yes, you have to have the explanation and the way to sell it.
Yeah, you need 10 million friends on Instagram, and now whatever you say is just powerful.
Yeah. Right. Let me take you back now. We went down that rabbit hole. That was good. You finished Eton, and what happened then? You finished high school. Where did Hedley go?
So I finished high school. I wanted to do osteopathy. Osteopathy, when I was first looking around at what I wanted to do, osteopathy was still a diploma course. I had obviously I'd had this great education, and when I suggested that I might go to London and do this diploma course, my father said, "You must be kidding." Didn't you're meant for better things, So I went. I went and studied anatomy at Bristol University, anatomical science. It's a science-based. It would lead to research. It's academic sort of anatomy. Lots of really pointy research stuff was going on. I actually aligned myself with there was a fellow there, Mike Adams, was doing research on this intervertebral disc pressure.
Right.
He was using a force transducer to pull through the disc.
Transducer.
Yeah. So measuring, getting electrical output from different forces being experienced inside the disc, and so taking these cadaveric motion segments, a couple of vertebrae with a disc, and then putting them in a hydraulic press,
Yeah.
putting them in, flexion, and side bending, and adding, 2,000 newtons, and just seeing what happens next. Injecting this little force transducer and getting a stress profile. So I obviously, it was spinal, right? It's spinal research. I still wanted to be an osteopath. I liked the idea. I mean, I had hurt myself playing rugby, and the fellow who helped me was actually a chiropractor. So this is when I was 16, 17 years old. And so I liked what this fella could do. I liked the fact that there was just this guy, and his brain and his experience and his knowledge could work out this. The first time I saw this fellow, I was in a lot of pain, and I'd seen different people. I'd seen the doctor. I'd seen different, but this guy just asked me questions that made sense. It's like his way of doing diagnosis. His questions were actually determined to get to a tissue causing symptoms or to give him actual information. And I just felt like, having had this back problem for a while, this was a person who actually was going to find out what had happened to me mechanically, and then was going to do something about it. And I just thought this was like wizardry. Right? This is amazing stuff. This guy and his knowledge could straighten me back up and get me out of pain. I was so convinced, So at Bristol, I studied anatomical science, made sure I got my name on with Mike Adams' work, made sure I appeared there. So I'm in a journal somewhere. I'm in Spine 1999 or something. There's a paper there
with the transducer.
Yeah, with the force
transducer. It sounds like something you buy on those late night shows.
Yeah,
a transducer. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it wasn't, but what it was time spent in the cadaveric lab chopping up spines.
Well, that would have come in handy later on in your osteopathy diploma.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I remembered once I got to the BSO was trying to chop through a facet joint capsule. This is an incredible piece of engineering. Like when you strain, when you have a capsulitis, lumbosacral capsulitis, you've seriously applied a lot of forces to this piece of tissue to be able to cause harm. This is a tough piece of tissue. Yeah. So I don't think I would have had quite the sense of it if I wasn't trying to remove L3 from L4.
I like that they call it simple mechanical lower back pain. Like it's
I know
it's simple, but it's not very simple. But anyway, all right. So you get into you go to the BSO, you start osteopathy there. Who were some of the people you remember there as being influential? Hello, everyone. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank everyone for watching and listening to the podcast. If you have received value from this episode, the kindest thing you can do for me is to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the channel on whichever platform that you are listening on. If any of the conversations have resonated with you and you feel that I can help elevate your practice, you can find me at successinpractice.net. That is, the Success in Practice program can be found at successinpractice.net. The Success in Practice program is the signature program that takes a practitioner who may be struggling with retaining patients. They may not be certain about building effective treatment strategies, and they may feel somewhat anxious and doubtful about what they are going to do with a patient. And they are not really accelerating in the real world of private practice. It takes this practitioner and it turns their careers right around to the point where the patients have an effective diagnosis and a real treatment plan that they can take home. Patients are happy to book in multiple sessions with you, and they are confident about your abilities. And more importantly, you now have direction and are confident about your own abilities. The program streamlines how you operate as a practitioner. Guys, you should have been taught this at university, but you weren't. You may have been practicing for the last few years thinking there has to be a better way. There has to be a more effective way of engaging with patients and getting them results. Well, there is. And this is what the program delivers. Go to successinpractice.net and check out the options available to you. See where I can help you easily grow your patient list and finally earn the rewarding income that you deserve. For all the information on how you can reach me personally, check out the show notes. Also in the show notes, you'll find a link to the chat transcripts from these podcasts. These are valuable and a wealth of information. I really hope that you're enjoying the podcast. Guys, leave a comment if there's any questions on this episode. And please, don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the channel. Now, back to the show.
I mean, at the time, I think Clive Stanton was the was running the BSO. He he had a steady hand. The BSO was in some trouble even back then in terms of funding. My course was one of those courses that didn't quite know who was going to be their accrediting body. I don't remember the full story, but there was there was at least a 12-month period when I was in about year 3 where we didn't have an accrediting body. There was Who was it going to be? I actually have it's not on the wall anymore, but I actually, in the end, my year, and I think we were the only year, my certificate of for my bachelor's is stamped from the Open University.
Oh.
The Open University in England was this. It's kind of like a TV show that would come on BBC Two at like 11 o'clock in the morning and show you how Newtonian the third law of thermodynamics worked or something. It was like this really. It was available to everyone. It was public education,
right?
Yeah. And so, but I get it. They had all kinds of funding difficulties. Like osteopathy is expensive to teach, right? It's expensive to educate properly. It's expensive to keep students safe. It's expensive to run a student clinic and to safeguard the public and safeguard your practitioners and safeguard your whoever's doing the supervising. Like, I mean, this thing is expensive. Anyway, so by the time I got to BSO, it was also a degree, and so another
Your dad
degree.
was happy.
So my dad was happy.
Yeah, right.
I did. I mean, eventually, I did. I have a tale, which is probably I don't know if anyone else, because I was meant for greater things, but I decided to go and become an osteopath. When I was about four years in practice, my father had hurt his neck, and he lived about 2 hours away from me. And he phoned me up and said, "Oh, son, I've hurt my neck. I can't sleep. I can't look over my shoulder. I've got pins and needles in my thumb. I'm in terrible trouble." And I said to him, "Oh, that sounds pretty serious. You better go and see the GP and see what you've done to yourself." And he said, "Oh, I've got to see the doctor." Yeah, better go and see the GP. I mean, they're special people. I mean, off you go. And so he gets like some
he didn't get
ibuprofen or something like that, and he comes home and he takes the ibuprofen and he phones me 3 days later going, "Oh, mate, I haven't slept for 3 days. I can't, it's terrible." "But you saw the GP." "Yeah, I took the pain. Nothing happened. I still can't move my hand. I still can't move my shoulder." I said, what are you going to do? Are you going to go back to the GP? And he says, "I know what you're doing, you bastard. Come down here and fix me up." And I did. And I fixed him up pretty quickly. And so, I think, so then he got to see that actually, an osteo is a real thing, right? And we do real stuff. And we learn tricks that can, get you immediately out of pain and immediately out of suffering. And I still, I mean, there are other practitioners that can do some of the magic that we do, but for all the medics would like to say that where's your evidence? Where's your evidence? And I know, for example, that one of the problems with the UWS is that in the end you're trying to run a science-based program at a health and science department with no evidence. No tangible evidence. But the evidence is in the fact that people, I mean, I know you're a busy practitioner. I'm a busy practitioner. Come and sit in my wedding room and see the evidence. Like, it's perfectly obvious, the bloody evidence. It's just, how are you going to test that, and how are you going to make it falsifiable, and how are you going to make it scientific? But these are people in pain, and they're making very real choices about how to get out of pain and where to spend their money. And you know, people in pain soon find out what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
I mean,
going back to what you said earlier, I mean, they possibly could all be delusional.
It's possible.
That's possible.
I said to a patient today, I said, you know, it's possible that you've just come here for my aftershave.
Or the jokes. They just see us for the jokes. Yeah, that's possible, but it's not probable. I think people bet with their money, and ultimately, if you want to see what works, follow the money. You know,
right?
You know,
I mean, but while we're on that, I do understand that we are competing with some simple stuff that does have evidence. I mean, there's some stuff, the evidence is strange. I mean, there's evidence that our emotional state. There's a great book called Drunk Tank Pink. Have you met that?
I haven't.
It's this particular color of pink, and if you sit men in a room with this particular paint color of pink, these men become docile and softer and less irritated and frustrated. So, like in 1970, 1980, they painted all the inside the holding cells in all the prisons in the US got painted with this drunk tank pink, because evidently this particular color softens men's behavior. I mean, that very good evidence for that.
Wonder where you'd see that kind of pink.
Yeah, I'm not. It's like kryptonite, mate. I stay away from it.
Anyway, all right, moving on.
So, I mean, evidence. Like, evidence. But what does that tell us? That there's a color out there that changes the brain. I mean, I mean, yeah. If just showing a person a color can change the brain, and we're doing much more than just flashing colors at people, right? We're changing their embodied experience of how they are in their body, right?
Well, even the evidence coming out around COVID and post-COVID about physical touch, just plain old physical touch, you know, and the therapeutic effect of just you know, a hug or touching or something, right? And so that's, you know, there's obviously a lot to unpack there. And yes, there are some.
Actually, while we're on that, did you see that? I read that in the UK, one of the major hospitals, Manchester or Newcastle or something, they'd set up there was a new aspect to their physiotherapy department where they were allowing no physical contact whatsoever, because they discovered there was evidence that physical contact did this really awkward thing where it created a relationship between the patient and the practitioner, and that somehow that was unpalatable in terms of the process. That we really people shouldn't get. It slows down. You know, it lacks independence, or it lacks. There's less. So you know, a physiotherapy department no longer using touch. That's out there now.
Well, that's, I mean, I haven't seen that, but I wouldn't be surprised if that existed, and if that was something that...
It's not a cost saving. It's nothing to do with costs.
I'm sure it's not.
It's nothing to do with being able to email people the treatment protocol.
No. And then getting AI to actually take over and do it for you.
No, that's not what it is. You're wrong. You're a cynic.
Okay, so Hedley graduates from the BSO. What happens then, Hedley? You got...
I was very lucky. Yeah, I was very lucky. I had a good friend of mine who's is still practicing, Pete Leach. He's in Tasmania. He was a year ahead of me when we were at the BSO, and mate, he had great skills even when we were in. So it was year 4 for us. We only had 4 years back in those days, and I mean, he needed somewhere to live, and I had a spare room, and so he and I became mates. And it was really good having a mate who was in the 4th year, final year. he obviously qualifies. I go into the final year. He was working with a great team of people in Milton Keynes, of all places in England. I don't know if you haven't heard of Milton Keynes, that's a blessing. It's one of
Okay.
those it's one of those weird designer towns that they created, overflow sort of city.
Mm-hmm.
Very strange place to find yourself. Anyway, Peter goes and works with a group of people up there and establishes himself, and then he decides he's going to go off. He's going to go to Australia. He's going to go somewhere else, and he says to me, why don't you see if you can get my job? It's a great place. So I was working in an orthopedic medicine sort of practice, but this was a fellow, Dr. Simon Petridis. He'd gathered a bunch of physios, a bunch of chiros, a bunch of osteopaths. He had this great multidisciplinary team-based practice that was sort of signed off by the orthopedics, so the GPs felt happy sending patients to the practice because ultimately they were receiving a type of orthopedic care or orthopedic supervision. And it's a very clever business model because all of the younger practitioners are doing all the work and very, very successful business model. But I was very lucky to end up there because I met so many great young practitioners. Like lots of practitioners there were just 2 or 3 years in the trade, like all struggling, all trying to work together, all calling each other into the practice, into the rooms. Oh God, someone's come in with a TMJ problem. I hate TMJ. Run around. I've got someone come and help me in room 3. I've got this terrible TMJ. And we were all very, very proactive at supporting one another because I think we were all experiencing that thing that new graduates experience, which is like, how on earth am I supposed to do the thing that I've been trained to do? I actually somehow, even though I passed all my exams and learnt all my anatomy and all my neurology and physiology, somehow I don't actually know what I'm doing and where to start. I mean, I don't know if you... I think it was different for you because you started off... you were already doing massage work and doing therapy work. So I think for you it was a different journey.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that the whole time that I was in student clinic, I was actually relying on supervision to help me with the decisions. So I think it's this, and I think I'm going to do that. Oh yeah, that sounds like a very good idea. Just be careful. And so, off you go. But as soon as you're then with no supervision, you realize that
it's all on you. It's all on you.
Make these decisions, and I'm not allowed to get them wrong. That's difficult, right? You're given a whole bunch of effective techniques that, when used poorly, can get you into trouble. So,
the good thing about like an internship type model where you can go and actually apply your work without the responsibility of
the ultimate responsibility.
And so that's a good way of learning because you just hit the ground running when you do graduate, and then you feel really at ease.
Yeah, and
so that's a good way of learning.
I found it. I mean, I had for me, it was a very mechanistic time. Like I had a real sense that, right, I found a vertebra that's not moving properly. This is clearly what I need to intervene with. This vertebra needs to move. I mean, I feel sorry for some of those early patients because I'm not small.
Yeah.
And, if I decided that a joint needed to move, it moved. And so I had no difficulty creating change.
I think, it's also sometimes when you have, I guess, certain talents that you know that they're going to be there. It's more about how you put things together rather than what you do.
I mean, one of the things it's important to know what you don't know, like ask for help. You're struggling. You've not understood this person in front of you. You haven't managed to come to a diagnosis that you could defend. This is a fee-paying patient. You're 30 minutes into squandering the session and wondering what to do. Quick, go and find someone with 3 or 4 more years experience than
Mm.
you and have them show you what to do next.
So your advice to new graduates is to definitely go and
You
work
have
with
to be,
somebody.
you
Yeah.
have to. I can't believe, I mean, as you know, I mean, I taught at UWS and I know lots of those graduates, and it surprised me later on, not necessarily for your cohort, but later on you were hearing about people just going straight into practice for themselves. Like, what are you doing? You can't, that's not going to be enjoyable.
Mm.
Ask for help, like get more guidance. Like it's a whole process. Like my stuff wasn't really working for about 3 years. Like,
Well, that's the art of osteopathy. I mean, we mentioned in the introduction about the science. You can learn the science,
yeah,
but the art of osteopathy really requires that you have somebody
yeah,
guiding you, and not really. It's not sort of more about shaping what you do, but
yeah.
at least pushing you to the limits of your own wisdom, so that you can then explore your own boundaries and push past those yourself.
Well, mate, I absolutely agree because I've had lots and lots of practitioners, worked with lots of youngsters, and there is a danger for some personality types that they've learned 3 tricks
Mm.
and then they stick with these 3 tricks and try and make them work for all presentations. If you're not a person who has bravery as a personality type, you're going to need someone to take your hand and show you how to do these things.
Mm.
Well, and while we're on that, you might have bravery as a personality type, and so you probably need supervision just the same, right?
Yeah.
Because being overly brave
That can get you into
early
trouble.
in your career can get you into all sorts of trouble. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so what brought you to Australia, Hedley? I mean, what happened there? How did you get to
Yeah.
Australia, and where did you
No,
work when you first arrived?
yeah, well, it was never my intention. I married an Australian
No,
who I met in
that does
London,
it. That's the
and
kryptonite.
then yeah. Well, I actually thought I was very English once upon a time. I was very happy in England. I'm a family person. My family are very important to me. I really didn't think I was going to immigrate. But things changed for me, and it was necessary for my ex-wife to be closer to home,
Mm-hmm.
and so we packed up and came over. I have to say I was very pleased. So I've only ever really lived in Sydney since coming to Australia. I came to Australia in 1998.
Mm.
I was and mate, I was. And a lot of people did. I noticed that you had Cliff Avery was on
Yeah,
a couple of weeks back,
good
and
guy,
he
Cliff.
came over like 8 weeks in front of me.
Mm.
So a lot of people, the Olympics were coming, right?
Yes,
Sydney was the place to be,
yes.
and so quite a few people were coming over and really enjoying it.
Mm. So where did you work when you first came over,
So
Hedley?
I started at Ann Cooper's place.
Wow.
Actually, sorry, one before that, I started in Solutions for Pain in Drummoyne with
Right.
Louise Adam.
Yes.
I'm not sure how that happened. I don't remember how that happened. Um, maybe I don't know. We didn't have email in those days,
Mm.
right? So how did we communicate with
You
people?
just
I'm not
pick up
sure.
a phone and make a phone
Did you
call.
pick up a phone? I mean, something like that. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So Louise Adam in Drummoyne, and then Ann Cooper and Paul Harridans in Newtown.
Yep.
Newtown. That was a fun, busy place
Yeah.
to be. Right. Lots happens around Ann Cooper.
Yeah. Yes.
She's just got that type of dynamism that she's got that kinetic energy where lots happens. Yeah, I really enjoyed my time
Good.
in Newtown.
Yeah, I remember there was a couple of. I think Deepak was there too for a little while.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
Deepak spent some time there.
So yeah, I remember coming. I remember working there when Paul was on sick leave.
Right.
So that was it was an enjoyable place to work.
Yeah.
Newtown is a very eclectic place. Like it's a
Yeah.
very diverse place.
Like really quite a range of very
Yeah.
different people coming in as patients. Yeah.
That's right. And so it's a good place to, I guess, cut your teeth in terms of osteopathy, because it was an osteopathic clinic, right? I mean,
Yes,
they
it
didn't,
was.
no
Yeah.
mincing words and no
That was it.
mincing.
Yeah.
You were just applying really good osteopathy there. So it's a really good place to, I guess, cut your teeth. Okay, so you did that, and then Did you go anywhere else before you went to Leichhardt? How did that work?
Yeah.
How did that
Well,
come about?
I also had like an afternoon with Vanessa Malone was in the
Mm-hmm.
city,
Mm-hmm.
and she was in a more that health center was quite a broad range of different types of people, different stuff. And I met a fellow in there, a massage therapist. Um, he and I had started to share really big patients. Like he was getting, he'd work on, but 6'8" basketballers or something like that, and then he asked me if I could help him, and then I realized he could help me, and so all of a sudden, working together, he and I were getting more results and easier results. Like I was
Yeah.
able to work less hard. And so after 6 months there, I said to him, "Hey, you and I can do this, right? Let's kick this in, and I'll open up a practice." That was actually in Annandale.
Mm-hmm.
So my first practice in Australia was Johnson Street in Annandale. Yeah,
Yeah, I know the
they're
street.
too close to the pub, as it turns out.
Yes. The pub on the corner.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Too many. I tried. Yeah, tried to fill your day with patients so you don't end up in the pub.
Look, the Annandale pub was known for its, I guess, very loose attire as well for the people that attended there.
That was down the other end of Johnson Street.
Yeah.
I was mid. Yeah, so I was at the North Annandale.
Right.
I'd heard tales of what goes on at the Annandale. I'm surprised you even know that, mate.
Well, mate, when Anne moved to Stanmore,
Yeah,
I
that's
helped,
down that end
I
of
helped,
town. Yeah,
yeah, I helped her transition there, and Johnson Street was just on the
yeah,
other end of
that's right.
of Parramatta Road.
Yeah,
But you hear of this stuff. You
yeah.
kind of it's not hard to hear of it.
No, no, all right.
Anyway, okay, so then,
So yeah, so now I'm in practice for myself in Annandale, and
mm,
yeah, and that's work. It works great. I mean, I don't know the Australians at the time, the public at the
mm.
time were ready for an osteopath in Annandale. Like it really wasn't hard to spread the word. Like we were busy quickly. Like I was surprised. Yeah,
I always talk about a boom in osteopathy in the 90s,
yeah,
in the 90s and early 2000s.
yeah,
And I don't know, I'm trying to put my finger on it. I don't know why that was, but I think it might have had something to do with the efforts of people like Ivan Lullerman and Peter Cash and
yeah,
those. I had a chat to George Stillion as well a couple of
yeah,
weeks ago on the podcast. I think the unification of the Australian Osteopathic Association around that time, and I guess the establishment of the University of Western Sydney course as
yeah,
a new thing, really created some excitement around the profession.
yeah.
Um,
Well, and it created
but
the possibility.
that flew out to the public, and I saw this boom, and
Yeah,
everyone was busy.
yeah,
You know, and
yeah.
so can you put something to that? I mean, you were practicing at the time.
I
Can
mean,
you have anything add to that? I mean, that might not be correct what I'm saying, but that was my feeling. What do you
so I
think?
mean,
Can you comment on that?
I'm not sure. Right? One of the things. Okay, so something similar happened to osteopathy in the UK 10, 15 years beforehand. And it seemed to be an awareness that your GP isn't going to help you. Like your GP's busy, your GP's got 6 minutes, and so there was a period where other practitioners, physical therapists were of value. Like if
Mm,
my doctor can't help me, I need to find someone who can.
mm,
I think I got a sense that there was a shift between an older generation who did everything that their GP told them to do, um, had a real sense that their GP had their best interests at heart and that the GP
mm.
was the source of all medical knowledge. And then this had waned. There was a new idea that sort of said, actually, you're going to need to be more in charge of your own health. You're going to need to make some decisions for yourself, like active care. You're going to have to be like an active patient.
Yeah.
Stuff like that was happening in midwifery as well. Like
Mm,
you know, expectant mothers were being asked, what would you like to do? Like, how do you see this pregnancy going? How do you see this birth going? Do you have any, what are your choices? Like, people were beginning to get a sense that they had a choice in what they purchased as healthcare. I think osteopathy was along as one of the things you might purchase.
Yeah. The shift out of the public model of care as well into more access to private health insurance.
Yeah.
I think would have driven that as well. People then had more choice, and with more choice,
I mean, it was a weird time because none of your patients had heard of an osteopath. It's just their mate so and so had seen an osteopath, and they think it might have been you, and now they're here to see you. Like, it was interesting. It was like a wildfire. It was just,
and you weren't advertising. It's not like you were,
No, never. No. You never had to advertise.
No, I mean Yellow Pages or something like that.
Well, I think when you move to practice, you put your business in Yellow Pages. But I mean, there's been quite a history has those Yellow Pages fiascos, and I don't know that it ever made an awful lot of difference to business.
No, I don't think it did. But that's the only advertising you could ever do anyway. Short of being on the radio or on TV, but that's not. That.
I mean, I think after that, you just had to be a noteworthy practitioner. You had to come up with the goods. Your livelihood depended on it. Like, each patient, you could never take a patient for granted. Each patient needed impressing. You needed to bring your best work every time. You needed to do a good job every time.
And they told everyone about you.
And then they tell everyone about you. But you're right. It was a boom. It was a boom period. And that was the time when I think it was Peter Green who said, Hedley, we need someone. There's a part of the course which I think would suit you in the 5th year. Teach it. How do you feel about teaching the 5th year students? I think it was Peter.
Yeah, it would have been Peter. Peter was the I think the
coordinator
at the time.
And so I was very happy. I mean, I hadn't taught before in any way, but I was still recent enough graduate. Like, I was only 7 years qualified at that point. And I think that was about right. That was and I had the BSO training, which, like we said, 90 years of instilling the same sort of principles, and I really liked those principles. They were working for me in practice, and so I felt that it was important to show the students some of the stuff I'd been shown. Actually, you mentioned in the brief that it was the minimal leverage techniques that I liked. I really did like them because, for me, they were a way of showing students that, you need to move a joint, but thumping stuff and whacking stuff, like, I really felt there was a way of teaching students that preload, that pre-tension, like, how can you get in there in a proprioceptive manner? Like, how can you get a sense of what the joint is doing, not just, that's the one I want, bang. So I always thought that was a good way of going from, prescriptive sort of technique to a felt sense, working towards a felt sense of what is this tissue telling me? What is the joint doing in its environment? Like, getting a deeper sense of what's working and what's not working, and what you need to do to create a change.
Tell us a bit more, just for the listeners, about the minimal lever approach when it comes to HVLA. How does it differ in the sense of that particular approach versus, say, a more loaded approach?
Long lever approaches. Well, the idea is simply that you're it's called coupling. The idea is coupling, so that most coupling that people understand is the side bend with counter rotation. You understand that the spine is set up to work and move and adapt in those directions. But in actual fact, what you're doing is you're loading a capsule. You're loading a big, thick, fibrous ligament to a point of tension. And the idea is that you can minimalize your primary thrust direction by adding other mechanical moments across that facet, across that capsule, so that you could decrease the amount of impulse you're going to be required to deliver if you've included the breathing and the traction and then some of the, the AP shifting and so that you could really minimize any chance that you've over mobilized. Yeah.
So I guess this is the point that I want to make to maybe some of the younger listeners that might be going through this right now.
Yeah.
Is that we learn the more structured kind of approach to HVLA in our third year, where you set up the different force vectors, you apply the line of force, and then you preload the joint, and then you apply the impulse.
And you're sort of looking for a mechanical endpoint that says,
Yes.
I've come to the end of range. Yeah.
Yes. Now, that utilizing a minimal lever approach becomes a lot more difficult if you haven't already learnt those boundaries.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Yeah,
So when I observe some of my esteemed UK, say, osteopaths that I see online, when they're doing a HVLA or they're promoting their own HVLA course or so forth, it seems very flowy and fluidy, and they're kind of just moving things around. Yeah, right. And then and that works, and it works great. But that's why it looks that way, is because they're trying to take in all those little different levers and AP directions, and they've kind of turned it into a very flowy, fluidy type of lockup, rather than side bending, rotation, flexion, extension, bang,
And your body, as a practitioner, your body feels differently, right? If you're trying to use your hands and from your hand to your elbow to feel what a joint is doing, that's one level of proprioception, but you're very much locked into what your hands and elbows can tell you. If you realize that you can move your body in or move your body out or drop your hips or so, at this point you realize that your back can proprioceptively tell you, gives you information about this fascia.
Your thigh.
Your knees, your thighs, your ass is listening to what's going on. I mean, so it's a way of extending the felt sense to actually pick up finer pieces of information about the preload and the tension on the joint. But absolutely, it's obviously over and above being able to mechanically have an impression on a joint. It's a lot to ask for undergraduates, but they can do it. I mean, I think it was brilliant how everyone. I mean, I remember it was a lot, right? There's a lot of stuff going on in your fifth year. In your fifth year, you kind of forget that you're going to be in practice and you're learning things to teach you how to be in practice. You're actually thinking, Christ, I just need to pass this course and not fail, and I need to not be a student anymore. I'm in so much debt, right? But in actual fact, the practitioners are hoping to show you some skills that are going to make life in practice enjoyable. If you take too simplistic an approach to being a practitioner, you're likely to experience boredoms and frustrations, So if someone can give you, a little bit further ahead knowledge that you'll come to, the hope is that it sustains your interest.
Yeah, if you take a simplistic approach, I think you're going to get slapped in the face as soon as you open your doors anyway.
It's dull and boring.
But yeah, that's the point. I think that it's very flowy and fluidy because there's a lot more going on from a sensory aspect. And I guess it's a process, right? Like, get all your mechanical levers in place, and then learn that really well, and then you can start to kind of apply all those little fine tuning kind of movements. And that, I know that worked. I still use it to this day. It works really well for me when I actually have a tiny lady.
Exactly. You're aware that you don't want to add any force that you don't have to.
Yes.
And so you search around for that first point of interaction rather than that last point, the mechanical point. Yeah.
Yeah. As a big guy myself, the lean, tiny ladies are often the hardest to adjust. The big blokes are quite easy because you use their own body weight against them. But
also, I find another time is in those hypermobile spines. There's very flexible hypermobile. You get what I call that hypermobile fixation. Like every now and then there's a joint in that hypermobile spine that's gone into that local segmental sort of shutdown. And you desire to use manipulation to create a change at the exact segment that is unhappy without applying a whole bunch of untidy forces through a hypermobile neck, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that level of focus. And then, I mean, I just find that the more of your body you use, especially like, you know, your glutes and your thighs, your hamstrings, there's a level of finesse using your body that's not available using just your wrists and elbows. That's my experience of it.
Yeah, you can navigate your way through the hypermobility.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, all right. And at the moment, Hedley, I mean, practicing obviously for a good 30 years.
Yeah. Man, I remain really enthusiastic about being an osteopath.
Right. And you're a generalist? I mean, you're still kind of seeing all different bits and pieces, or have you?
So I don't know. I think, I suppose I'm a generalist to some degree. I mean, I've become slightly expensive, I think, compared to the going rate, and so I think people can see a cheaper osteopath. I mean, I've done this for 32 years.
Yeah.
Right?
So my experience, I remember when we moved, when the Newtown Osteopathic Centre moved to Stanmore.
Yeah.
That was within the vicinity of where you were practicing.
Oh yeah.
And I remember looking at some of the surrounding clinics and seeing your fees, and you were one of the first people that had much higher fees than anyone else that was practicing.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, oh, I wonder what's going on there, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is, you know, but it was looking back on it now, it's a good move because people are going that way, and you're setting fees for a certain service that you're trying to deliver on. What I want to ask you around that is that are you focused on results or are you focused on time? Like, you know,
time. Okay. Well, I'm glad you asked this because I thought maybe this would come up. Well, there was a bit before this that I wanted to mention, which is the learning and how you do the learning and how you schedule your own learning. How do you become good at what you do? Which I think might be some of what's missing a little bit. Like I've said, I mean, all the way through my life, I've felt that life is a skills. You're here to acquire skills, and then if you've got the skills, you win. You know, game theory, right? Get the skills. When I moved from minimal leverage work into more fluid-based work, so I use a lot of craniosacral techniques and indirect techniques now, a lot of strain, counter-strain techniques. When I was learning to get that to work, I wasn't sure what osteopathy could or couldn't do. There are patients where you think, well, I've never seen osteopathy do this, but can it do that? Can osteopathy change your breathing? Can osteopathy change your depression? I mean, can I improve your sleep with osteopathy, right? When I was trying to learn that, which was 20 years, about the time that I was teaching, so about 20 years ago, man, on Fridays, I would have a Friday where I would try not to see any of my regular patients. I'd try not to see fee-paying patients. And Friday was set aside for taking 90 minutes if I needed to really get an understanding of what's going on with this patient from a felt sense, craniosacral breathing, involuntary motion type approach. And I felt that it was more honest to not charge those people. I had a bunch of patients where I said, I don't know if this is going to work for you, so I'm not going to charge you. So I actually had about 5 years of my career where I was seeing 4 or 5 patients in a week it was experimental for me. I wasn't sure what osteopathy could do. I certainly wasn't sure enough to charge people real money. Like you said, I mean, my fees were higher. And I felt that it was unreasonable to charge people for my learning. I was still learning to get osteopathy to work. So that was 1/5 of the week was dedicated to learning with other patients. I eventually got to a point where I felt I had all the skills, all those urban legends, all those the lore of osteopathy, all those blind osteopaths who could, change every single part of your being just by looking at you. Eventually, I felt like I'd gotten all the skills which I thought were reasonable for a modern day osteopath, and I now use those skills for being in the world, and they're more actually. I mean, I think the reason I work 2/3 of the week I work mechanically because that's cost effective. I mean, I can see patients in 20 minutes with the help of my massage therapist, and those people are happy with that, and they fit that model. But I still have 3-part days where I take my time. I mean, people are now being charged for my skills in those areas, but I can have a 90-minute session if I need to. And those patients don't pay any extra. It's just I have steered them towards, and I still feel, a lot of the patients that I'm looking after mechanically, I feel that many practitioners could probably look after them. What I take pride in is the other stuff, the unusual stuff, where you feel you've really brought about a change that only an osteopath who's been 30 years in practice would have access to that sort of change. It feels like a real privilege to have developed skills that can help people with the more obscure problems.
So what you've described there is a dichotomy between the mechanical patients that you see that obviously are happy with an outcome that you provide because they're paying for it, they're paying good money for it. Then you have another subset of patients that you see that that you're spending more time with them, but you're still getting a desired outcome that they're happy with. And they're paying you for that that outcome, and they're paying you the same amount of money, I assume, that your mechanical patient will be paying for a session. So what I'm gathering from that is that you're not so much focused on the amount of time you spend with someone, but more so on the results that you're giving them. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I think it's
because what I'm seeing,
that's the contract.
Yeah,
that's the contract. Please make me better.
Well, that should be the contract, but what I'm seeing amongst, I guess, some other, I don't want to say other osteopaths, but I'm seeing it out there in the clinic sphere, where people are kind of packaging up a service. You come and see us, you get this, you get that, you get a half an hour with me, you get asked these questions. It's a thorough history. It's a thorough this. You get exercises. You get and that's all what you get. Except nobody ever says you get the result that you want. And so I think that's where some of that's changed. I think people are really a bit more worried about not promising a result, because we can't really promise something that we can't, but at the very least communicating an experience that you've had, which may be similar to the patient that you're seeing. If a patient says to you, look, are you going to be able to get this right for me? You can say, look, I can't guarantee you results, but I've seen about 500 people who have had a very similar presentation. And I was able to help a good 98, 99% of them, And so having that kind of confidence to at least speak of a result is something that's maybe we're shifting away from.
Actually, I do tell people what result to expect because of the experience. I will say, well, I think it's this. And because I think it's this, I'm going to do such and such. And if I'm right, 10 days from now, you will be telling me blah, 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 blah. And so when in 2 weeks' time they're not saying blah, 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 I'm like, right, well, I need to start again. That didn't work. I got that wrong. My earliest assessment wasn't, and that's very reasonable. I mean, I'm actually, whilst because of my life's history, I feel we have value, and I think we should bill as we're worth, and so I have no problem billing for my expertise. However, I'm not in this for the money. Like, there are so many other ways to make money. Like, if you've become an osteopath because you think there are riches to have, I mean, that's one or two businesses manage to have great business models that turn really good coin. But most practitioners that
Oh, you're limited by the amount of patients you can see. Like,
yeah,
like how many
yeah,
patients you're going to be able to see.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
you can do really well being an osteopath. You can be comfortable. You can have a good
Yeah.
life. But I mean, you're
So
not
I
going to.
think yeah, I mean, when I think of what's available for osteopathy for practitioners,
Mm,
like what I got in terms of life lessons
mm,
from being in that room, having a personal relationship with all of those human beings,
mm,
right? Those, especially for me, like I said, I was one of three boys until my sister came along, and I went to an all boys school, and I had a very much an all boys experience. But mate, the thing that has changed me as an individual is spending time with female patients,
mm,
like valuing and respecting the feedback that you get, the personal feedback that you get from being in a room with females who care to tell you what they think is happening for you, or what they think your life is, or
mm,
what that like. That's fascinating for me because I don't experience anything that type of. That's not a feature of masculinity that I'm used to.
mm,
So, mate, 30 years of 50 females a week, like that has been my greatest ever education. Like
mm,
and I'm sure that's created, to a large degree, created the happiness that I enjoy now. I have three daughters, and and a wonderful wife, and I think all these females in my life, like I wouldn't be having a harmonious relationship with these individuals if I had become a stockbroker or something. Like
mm.
it's fascinating to spend time with other people, and they're obviously getting your care and your empathy, but there's a real privilege in being the person that spends time the way that we do with a person, and those different layers that a person can reveal to you. I mean, there's
Mm,
so much psychology in a room. I mean, especially if you're a head holder, you spend, or a bum holder. Like if you're a sacral
mm.
osteopath and you meet people from the pelvis up, I mean, that's an unusual way of meeting people, right? You're having a very privileged education, being in a room with all of those people telling you their tales and those virtual realities, right? Seeing as we're not necessarily in
Yeah,
an objective reality, you're entering each one of those human stories. That for me is just amazing.
it's fascinating, and it's I guess you're right. It's a privilege, and it's something that almost goes unnoticed because we do it day in, day out.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't stop and think and realize the actual stories that have been built up in our own minds from the people that have actually put them there. And, I get home to my wife and she's like, "Oh, so how was your day at work?" You kind of just, it's a question that do you really want to know? Do you really want to know?
Hang on, honey. Let me get the whiskey first, and then I'll tell you.
Hello, everyone. Just a quick break to give you some information on where to best find me. The first place is the private Facebook group called the Successful Practitioner Pathway. I've set up this private group as a place where practitioners can go and get tips and advice on how to best accelerate their practice and improve their clinical practice skills. The second place to find me is at successinpractice.net. That is where the Success in Practice signature program is housed. You can find more information about me and how I can best help you achieve success in your practice. So, the two best places, the private Facebook group, the Successful Practitioner Pathway, and successinpractice.net. I will link to both those places in the show notes. So, for more information, please see the show notes. Now, enjoy and back to the show. So, yeah, but you're right. It is a privilege, and seeing the changes that you can make, not just with your hands, but with conversation,
Yes.
that's a privilege too.
It's so damn human, right?
Yeah,
And
it is. It's
I
very
have
human.
become a better human for it. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask you about I guess, the current landscape of osteopathy.
Yeah.
As a profession, what is it? What do you like about it right now? What do you think is? Where do you think? What's the good stuff,
Well,
mate?
I mean, that question is, I'm living and working in Sydney, you know,
Mm,
and we have had a terrible shortage of being able to access practitioners. I mean, I no longer seek practitioners. About 10 years ago, I really struggled with being able to get the practitioners that I needed. To the point where I just decided it was easier to. I mean, I work more or less. So, I mean, I have my massage therapist. Like we can still burn through 65, 70 patients a week, which suits me fine. I mean, I haven't had an associate with me now. Well, I think since COVID, right? So,
Right.
So I'm not the best person to ask. I think So
Well, it doesn't have to be from a business sense, but what do you like about osteopathy at the moment? Just practicing osteopathy.
No, I definitely enjoy practicing osteopathy. I think that I think we still have a unique position, and I think we have a unique offering. I I think we're at a strange time in terms of I enjoy watching Caroline Stone's commentary on Facebook, etc. Caroline Stone was one of my. I was educated by her at some point at the BSO. She seems to be much more aware of the difficulties we're having as a profession, with the idea that we need to satisfy public money and public resources versus what I think we're offering the public privately. I still think we've got the most amazing offering, and people can't get it anywhere else. I think it's brilliant what we do. I also think that some of what made me a satisfied practitioner comes from my era, where I had a deep sense that you had to get the skills. Like me working Fridays for nothing. It was on you to get the skills. It was on you to seek out the guidance and the supervision from others. And it was going to be hard work, relentless hard work. Now, I was comfortable with all of that. So, when I meet younger folk, not necessarily osteopaths, but when you chat to a 25-year-old today, they're not necessarily looking to do the most work and take themselves through a long journey of trial and error and getting better at something. Mentality has changed. People seem to want to get rich quick or something, like as if. So I think it's a different era. University is a different era. What people want from university is different. One of the difficult truths for osteopathy is that if we do start finding more and more physical evidence for human interaction in a treatment room like this, it won't end up being owned by osteopaths. Yes. I mean, if we establish certain truths about physiological processes and the interaction, this will become science that will belong to all physical therapists. And so even if some of our deepest models, even the models that we hold on to, even if some of it, like let's say someone somewhere finds a bioenergetic field that can start to record the quantum mechanics that is the craniosacral system. Let's say someone does, right? And all of a sudden, all cranial osteopaths can feel, oh my God, finally there's something in the substrate that is human, that actually they found the field that I work with. Finally, I don't have to argue for evidence anymore.
Yep.
But it'll never be osteopathy. It'll never belong to the osteopaths. It'll belong to a field of science that will inform a physio, perhaps, or a medicalized practitioner, or whatever the physical therapists are 20 years from now when the evidence comes out. So, I think, whether we have evidence or not, I don't know what happens for osteopathy next 30 years. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't really know. People have changed their understanding of human contact. I mean, I've had one or two interesting situations in clinic in the since post-COVID, because some folk have really not had very much human interaction at all. And so sometimes they have a very low threshold for being around another human being and being touched by another human being. I mean, if that were to continue, if people were to be almost antisocial in their ability to receive care and receive physical input, Is it going to? Will we still spend time one on one with the person in the room if they've become a sort of a robotic AI driven individual? Like, where is the world in 30 years? I don't know. I think to speak on osteopathy, you'd have to be able to speak on a whole bunch of unknowns.
Yeah. No, definitely not incorrect. And I agree with what you're saying in terms of we are moving towards an unknown area and how osteopathy will be perceived,
Yeah.
even if it is osteopathy, even if a lot of what we what we understand to be true gets found out to be true.
Yeah.
It may not belong to us.
Yeah.
But I guess the onus though is on osteopathy to just say it as it is, right? Like you mentioned earlier that everybody has their own truth and their own lens.
Yeah.
And I guess if this is our truth, it's best that we say it and we speak it, because I guess in the context of history, if they ever look back and they'll say, hey, like we look back now on certain people in history and said, hey, look, they kind of said this before, they were ahead of their time.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe in 50 years' time, we'd like them to look back on osteopaths and say, they were ahead of their time. And that would be a good thing. I'd be happy. I'd lay in my grave pretty happy with that.
That'd be lovely if it's true.
If it's true, we don't know yet.
We could go, by the way, so we could end up with the lightning practitioners and the mesmerists.
We could. We don't know. If there was something that you'd change about today's landscape, like how maybe the profession, if maybe how the profession is governed or how we as ourselves associate with each other as osteopaths, what is it you'd change? Like if you could change something now that you think would have a really good impact, or something that you feel should happen but isn't happening, what is it that you change right away and make a good impact on this profession?
Well, hypothetically, I was never, because of my experience of the BSO running around trying to work out which university was going to give accreditation. And the fact that I have an open university degree, that doesn't make any damn difference at all. It doesn't make any difference who gave me my accreditation. What matters is that I can have the skills and do the work and impress my patients enough that the word spreads. So I always thought it was a bit uncomfortable when we started aligning ourselves with universities. I mean, again, with the BSO's heritage, right? Like, if that's where you went to become an osteopath, and if they said you're an osteopath, you're an osteopath, and the public, and that was it. That was the deal. And so I think when we tried to become science and we became apologetic for our lack of science, like, I don't feel the sort of inferiority complex that we seem to have somewhere in our profession, the need to kowtow to the medics or to apologize because we're complementary or alternative. I don't feel any of that. It's never been me. I always chose front and center to be a practicing osteopath. But I would, hypothetically, I would like to see us move to like an apprenticeship model, where you actually take someone on, with distance learning, and you buddy up for 3 years and you work in practice with osteopathy under guidelines. And then that becomes, that becomes your qualification. I mean, maybe there's a rounding off period for
like an internship model. Yeah. When you talk about that, are you discussing when you say, aligning ourselves with accreditation through university programs? Are you referring to regulation, or are you referring to just the university degree? Because the university degree gets you the registration.
Yes.
And we're regulated through APRA. Are you saying that I mean, regulation happened, I think back in the 80s and the 70s and the 80s. But are you saying that we don't need to be, you don't think regulation
No, I think we must be regulated. Like, I think it's really important for the public that standards are upheld. I think it's just a shame that the way in which we had to do it was to align ourselves with health sciences and universities that were going to be strict on there is only evidence and everything else you know, is lies.
Mm.
Like we ended up throwing, you know, you throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Like
Yep.
this, I well, so on occasion in the last 5 years, I've met new graduates. You know, they come into the practice. Someone says, "Oh, Hedley, you know, can I bring one of my graduates, one of my new practitioners in to meet you? Can you show them what you do?" And you meet this person, and my experience of it is they're not the same osteopath that I am. Like they weren't told the same stories. They weren't told to seek the same skills and the same knowledge. Like I feel through my 30 years, I have used osteopathy more and more and more to achieve more and more. And I've had to learn how those powerful understandings, how they can be used. I had to learn how to wield that power, right? It was on me to learn it. Now, a lot of the youngsters have been told there is no such power. It's a myth. There's no guru status. It's terrible that some people think they're gurus and everyone has to try and follow them. And none of us are ever as good as guru. Yeah, well, the problem is, to pretend that there's no magic in osteopathy, to pretend there's no magic in earnestly, empathically being in a room with a person for an hour and helping them make change in their body or change in their life or change in their awareness, change in their education. Like, mate, magic happens in these rooms. And that's what patients, sure, you can't necessarily promise magic. That would be foolish. But I would have finished being an osteopath by now if magic didn't happen. Like, I'd be bored of it by now. Like I'm still a seeker for understanding the human condition and what is this trip that we're on.
And I'm assuming that when you say magic, it's things that you can't explain.
Yeah,
so an unexplained change by you just doing very mundane things.
That I've changed one part of a person's body, and they come back 2 weeks later saying, "Oh my God, you didn't tell me that this other thing, you've cleared up this whole rash," or what.
Yeah, I can take a piss for the first time in 10 years.
Right. People credit you because their body changed, their being changed. And they didn't mention this other thing that was happening to them, but it was part of how their body was limited and how the inflammation was working. And it was part of their previous state of existence, and you changed it, you know? Yeah. And they're wonderfully happy about that. Yeah. And it used to bother me because I'm a science-based person that I didn't have a decent rationale for explaining that. But now, 3 decades later, who cares? If this has been transformational and your world has improved, bingo, I'm good with that.
So, Hedley, do you feel that you're closer to your, I guess, let's say your mentors, the people that taught you?
Yeah.
Do you feel that you're closer to that quality in terms of how you have chased osteopathy versus what somebody that's graduating from osteopathy now would be close to you? Do you feel that you're closer to them than what somebody now might be as close to you?
I don't know if
on average.
I'm not sure that a new graduate would understand what's going on in my treatment room. I don't know that they would.
Do you think that you knew what was going on in the treatment room from somebody that you observed when you were a student?
I didn't, but I believed in the story enough.
Right.
I believed in the story enough that it was
you had access to the story. You had access to it. You listened to it.
Yeah.
And you found it intriguing enough to go chasing it.
Yes, and I felt that it was my responsibility to make that become true for me. I was to try as hard as possible and to be in the physiology and be in that nervous system, be in that neuroendocrine state. Like ask the patient, so this anxiety, like where what do you mean it's under your diaphragm? Like help me. I need to feel it with you.
You're not observing that sense of responsibility in today's crop.
I think if you tell people,
let's say it's not there, you're just not observing it.
I think if you tell people to only feel safe around evidence in osteopathy, I think you're asking them to throw away 80% of the reason why osteopaths exist.
Right. So
I mean, that's our point of difference.
when
What
you
an
hear,
osteopath does.
yeah, when you hear somebody, whether they are an educator in an institute, in an osteopathic institution, whether they are a board member of an association,
Yeah.
whether they are a somebody in a position on a council or accreditation council, saying that they wish to promote evidence-based practice
Yeah.
as a means of pushing osteopathy forward.
Yeah.
Does that concern you? Do you get the heebie-jeebies there a little bit, or is that something that you take with a grain of salt?
I think it's a wonderful desire for us to have the evidence that explains what osteopaths do and why we hold the position that we do. Wouldn't it be fantastic? Clearly, there are some missing models that help us understand what's going on between two quantum field generators that are sharing a space. There is so much missing. I don't like that we imagine that doesn't exist for the simple sake of staying safe with evidence. Like
there's a clear difference between evidence-based practice and evidence-informed practice. Like
absolutely,
they are quite different things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
absolutely. I think, but I don't think there's an osteopath around today that wouldn't be open to better evidence. If you could supply it and give them the evidence, they would almost certainly modify their practice to include best evidence.
Yeah, the problem may arise though is when you hear people saying that we need to be evidence-based practice, that we should only then keep the things that have current evidence and discard what is not fundamentally underpinned by evidence. And if you want that, you will be discarding 90% of modern medicine, really, like not just
modern medicine is no different. If we stopped doing things that work just because we don't understand why they work, you'd be getting rid of a lot of modern medicine.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, look, for me, when you say to a patient, "Did you enjoy your holiday?" and they say, "Yes, I had a lovely holiday," you don't say, "Do you have any evidence? Is there any evidence to support how you feel about your holiday?
Or do you love your kids?"
Yeah. Do you have any proof of that? Like, what are we doing? These are human beings who are in pain.
Yeah.
They don't have time for you to gather your evidence. They want the last 200 years of human beings being one-on-one consultations, working as hard as they can, giving up Fridays, to make every possible difference they can for someone in front of them who's in pain or in in anxiety or whatever. That's what they're asking for. The only patients that ever ask me if there's any evidence for the techniques I'm using are GPs, right? Yeah. I always tell them that I'm only using strict scientific evidence-based practice until I've got rid of their, dizziness, migraine, whatever, sinusitis. And then I say to them, sorry, I lied. I used cranial osteopathy. There's no evidence for that at all. I mean, other than the fact that how well do you feel 3 weeks later? I mean, But they're the only people that hope I'm practicing evidence-based medicine. Why? I would be no good to you if I practiced based on available evidence.
Definitely. All right. Well, I'm glad we cleared that up.
I don't think you'll change what's going on because it's always been different. Policyholders are not clinicians. Policymakers are not clinicians.
How do you think, though? Given that we're a tiny profession, there's like something 3,000 or 4,000 of us.
Yeah.
How do you think that we could leverage ourselves a bit better than maybe what we're doing now in terms of at least safeguarding? Because there is a bit of a, I guess, I wouldn't say an attack, but the people who are advocating for the purely evidence-based approach, they're the ones at the moment who have, I guess, the public institutions, the universities, the pharmacological kind of system in place. How does our little association, profession, whatever you want to call it, how do we do better? Where do we need to shift? Do you think we're going with the tide, or do you think we need to kind of just Break it down a little bit more.
I think we're up against it. I think, like I was saying before with the paradox, that on the one hand, we're demanding greater and greater observable evidence of truth. But on the other hand, we're seeking deeper and deeper insights into our ultimate, our humanity and our ultimate truth. No, I see there's a divergence. I don't know if this is, Ian McGilchrist's left brain, right brain. Could be. I think that's a fascinating thing. No, man, I don't have any advice. I think anyone who's in the world making policy on behalf of osteopathy, they'd be frustrated by my approach that says, but, osteopathy is organic and we should just practice organic osteopathy and that's what the people need and that's what the people deserve. They'd find this frustrating that you don't understand the mechanisms at play. You don't understand how hard it is for us to maintain, getting private health insurance. You don't understand how difficult it is to maintain education standards. And you know what? I'm right. And I haven't suggested I have any practical answers. I have a hypothetical answer, which is let's keep osteopathy.
Right.
I think let's keep it in its form that it stood for 200 years helping people. Let's just keep what it is that's made osteopathy great. Let's stick with that, and let's not be insecure about the fact that we have trained fantastic practitioners for 200 years. Like, let's not be insecure about that. Let's continue to do that.
That's the whole thing about make osteopathy great again. That's why I've got the shirt, but I'll tell people about that in a minute. Look, one thing that's, I think you're right in that, and you said the hypothetical is let's keep osteopathy, as a unique point of difference in terms of what we do.
Yeah.
But I think one way that we can practically make a difference within the next at least 5 to 10 years is we need more of us. We need more of us that think in this way. So when we're looking at our education, we need to sit with the universities and say we need to do better at producing this type of practitioner. And we need to expand university courses. I've said it a lot of times. We need courses in Sydney. We need courses in Adelaide. We need courses in North Queensland. We need courses in other parts of the country. Sydney can handle 2 courses. Queensland can probably handle one up at North Queensland and one in Brisbane. And if we can, pump out graduates who are not just token graduates. I'm talking about graduates who have that shared responsibility that you discussed earlier of taking this profession and expanding on it, but the actual osteopathy part of it. Then we can at least have the same seat at the table as other allied health, if you want to call it that, because we'd have power in numbers. But the problem at the moment is we're not focused on that. I don't think I think we're trying to kind of like knock on doors, and it's a really big door and we've got a really tiny hand and it's just not, we're getting frustrated.
Yeah. I agree with everything you've said there. I wish I knew of a more direct practical thing that we could be doing as practitioners, but I don't. I think.
How much would that help you as an osteopath and a business owner? If you imagine if you had access to graduates, you took them on and you trained them, even if they graduated and didn't know much about the history of osteopathy, you take them under your wing, you have them practice, you have them enjoy and love what they do. They go and they build their big building and they take other people, and it just grows organically that way. We talked about a boom in osteopathy in the 90s, and I think that's why there was a boom, because there was a whole bunch of people that graduated from the International College of Osteopathy, a whole bunch of people from the Pacific College, a whole bunch of people that just expanded osteopathy, and it was osteopathy. It wasn't this hybrid of exercise-based, evidence-based, of I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just giving out this recipe, And if we need to, at the moment, have policymakers that understand this position, are ready to fight for it, and then can expand on it. And that's really the next 5 to 10 years. If we do that, we'll be in a good place. If we don't, then it's going to be a rough ride.
Yeah, no, I agree. Or if someone could please explain to us why we're unhinged and why osteopathy of old can't be carried forward into the modern era. Someone would have to explain to me why that is.
This is why
an understanding.
This is why I kind of got a little bit upset with the whole diversity and equity and inclusion aspect of what they were trying to do, and having different people from different, I guess, representations on the board and doing things, having different voices. And the problem when you have too many differing voices is that you don't move in the one direction.
Yeah.
And there's a clear pathway for protecting and expanding osteopathy. And we need, I guess, people that share a vision rather than just 10 different voices trying to pull in 10 different ways.
Stubborn old fellas like me.
And me.
I think we may need to be stubborn, and but I don't know.
Some old fellas get things done though, Hedley. It'll happen. But anyway, more
time will come.
Yeah, more on that in the future. Hedley,
it's a pleasure chatting with you. It's really
before I let you go, for everyone that's been asking me about this T-shirt, "Make Osteopathy Great Again," we finally got a little production line happening. So if you'd like some of these shirts for either yourself or your associates or the people that work with you, or you give them to your friends and your family.
Yeah.
I've put a link in the show notes so we can just click a link and go and purchase that online and spread the word out there. It's brilliant. It's pop culture.
I like it.
Say.
Looks great on culture.
So yeah, Make Osteopathy Great Again T-shirt. Get your size today. I think it comes in 3 colors. There's black, navy, and grey. So anyway, I'll be rolling it out when we have a drink soon, Hedley.
Excellent, buddy. I look forward to that.
Will do, mate. Thank you for joining me tonight.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Really enjoyed it.
Stay on the line with me for everyone else. That'll be the end of the podcast. Thank you for joining me for an episode and have a good evening.
Cheers, buddy.